The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the usual sounds of 800 different species conducting their daily business. Translator devices hummed softly as creatures from across the galaxy spoke in their native tongues. The air shimmered with holographic displays showing trade routes, population counts, and military reports. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium, his forearms holding data tablets while his scaled head read from the quarterly census report. His voice carried easily through the massive chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. The Andromedan sector reports steady population growth, Kethvar announced. Mining operations in the Vega system continue to exceed expectations. The crystal farms of Shard Prime have increased their output by 12%. Scattered around the circular chamber, representatives from nearly 1,000 worlds listened with varying degrees of attention. Some took notes on glowing tablets. Others whispered among themselves about trade agreements and territorial disputes. A few of the older species seemed to be sleeping. Kethvar's voice droned on through the routine statistics. Population numbers, resource production, fleet movements, communication traffic. The same boring reports they heard every 3 months. Nothing ever changed much in the civilized galaxy. Moving on to the newer territories, Kethvar continued, scrolling through his data. The human homeworld of Earth shows… He paused, his large eyes blinking as he double-checked his information. Several representatives looked up with mild interest. Humans were still something of a novelty in the council. They had only been members for 50 years, barely long enough to establish proper trade routes. "Is there a problem, Ambassador?" asked Senior Counselor Vexthul from his floating platform. The ancient being's body was mostly energy contained within a crystalline shell, and his voice echoed strangely through the translation systems. Kethvar shuffled his data tablets, clearly confused. The Earth entry appears to be empty. No communication logs, no ship movements, no resource reports. According to this data, there has been no activity from the Sol system for the past 6 weeks. A few chuckles rippled through the chamber. The Rigelian trade representative made a clicking sound that translated as laughter. Humans and their primitive technology. Probably another malfunction in their communication systems. "Remember when they tried to upgrade their orbital platforms last year?" added the Centaurian military attaché. "Their entire defense grid went offline for 3 days because they forgot to account for solar interference." More laughter filled the hall. Humans were viewed with a mixture of amusement and mild concern by most council species. They were eager, energetic, and surprisingly creative. But their technology lagged far behind galactic standards. Their ships were slow and clunky. Their weapons were basic projectile and energy systems. Their computers crashed regularly. Still, the council had voted to include them as members. Humans showed promise, and they occupied a strategic position on the outer rim of the galaxy. Plus, they were entertaining in their enthusiasm for everything galactic civilization had to offer. Senior. Counselor Vexthul's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should send a probe to investigate. Standard procedure for communication failures." "Is that really necessary?" asked the Altarian representative, her melodic voice carrying a note of impatience. "We have more important matters to discuss. The trade dispute between the Vegan colonies and the Sirius Syndicate requires immediate attention." "It will take only a few minutes to authorize," Vexthul replied. "Better to be thorough. The humans may need assistance with their equipment." Kethvar nodded and made a note on his tablet. "I will dispatch a standard survey probe immediately." Now moving on to the Vegan trade situation. The probe launched 3 hours later from the Council monitoring station in the Alpha Centauri system. It was a routine piece of equipment, designed for basic system surveys and communication relay duties. The journey to Earth would take 2 days through hyperspace. The probe emerged from its jump at the edge of the Sol system and immediately began its scan routine. Its sensors swept across the familiar arrangement of planets, moons, and orbital installations that made up humanity's home system. The first anomaly appeared within minutes. Earth's communication satellites were silent. Not malfunctioning or damaged, but completely inactive. The probe's attempts to establish contact received no response. The probe moved closer, its sensors working at full capacity. As it approached Earth's moon, its readings became increasingly strange. The orbital platforms that should have been bustling with activity showed no life signs. The moon-based mining operations that had been humanity's pride and joy were completely shut down. Most disturbing of all were the readings from Earth itself. The planet's surface showed massive geometric scars, perfectly straight lines carved across entire continents. Cities that should have been glowing with lights and heat signatures appeared dark and cold. The oceans themselves seemed different. Their chemical composition altered in ways the probe's sensors couldn't fully analyze. The probe transmitted its findings back to the monitoring station, then moved into closer orbit around Earth for a more detailed scan. Its cameras captured images of the planetary surface that made no sense. The geometric scars were not random damage, but appeared to follow some kind of pattern, like a massive circuit board etched into the ground. In the middle of its final transmission, the probe's signal simply stopped, not cut off by interference or equipment failure, but ending abruptly as if the probe had simply ceased to exist. At the Alpha Centauri monitoring station, Technician Eulara stared at her screens in confusion. The probe's telemetry had been transmitting normally 1 second, then nothing. She tried to re-establish contact, but her signals found no target to lock onto. "Station Commander," she called to her supervisor. "We've lost contact with the Earth." "Probe." Commander Zextel floated over to her station, his tentacles curling with concern. "Equipment malfunction?" "Unknown, sir." The probe was functioning normally, then simply stopped transmitting. "I'm reading no trace of it in the Sol system." The commander reviewed the probe's final data transmission. The images of Earth's scarred surface and silent cities were disturbing, but what bothered him more was the abrupt end to the transmission. In 30 years of service, he had never seen a probe simply vanish like that. "Send this data to the Council immediately," he ordered, "and prepare a second probe with enhanced sensors." "Should we alert the emergency response fleet, sir?" Commander Zextel considered this. The evidence suggested something serious had happened to Earth, but launching a military response based on one lost probe seemed excessive. The Council would want more information before taking drastic action. "Not yet," he decided. "But put the Border Patrol on standby alert. Something strange is happening in the Sol system." The second probe launched 12 hours later, equipped with military-grade sensors and communication equipment. It followed the same route as the first probe, emerging at the edge of the Sol system with its defenses active and ready. This probe lasted 17 minutes before its transmission ended in the same abrupt manner as the first. Back on the Council, Homeworld, Senior Counselor Vexthal reviewed the reports with growing concern. 2 probes lost, strange readings from Earth, and no communication from humanity for over 2 months. This was no simple equipment malfunction. He called an emergency session of the Security Council, bringing together the military leaders and intelligence chiefs of the major galactic powers. The meeting room was smaller than the main council chamber, but the atmosphere was much more serious. "Gentlemen," Vexthal began, his energy form pulsing with urgency, "we may have a situation developing in the Sol system. Earth has gone completely silent, and we've lost 2 investigation probes under mysterious circumstances." The assembled leaders reviewed the data with professional interest. The images of Earth's scarred surface were disturbing, but not necessarily threatening to galactic security. "Could be a natural disaster," suggested Admiral Krintol of the Centaurian fleet. "Asteroid impact, solar flare, something that knocked out their infrastructure." "What about the geometric patterns?" asked Intelligence Director Nimble. "Those scars look artificially created." "Human construction project gone wrong?" offered General Vexcol of the Rigellan Defense Force. "You know how ambitious they can be with their engineering projects." Senior Counselor Vexthal wasn't convinced. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Earth going silent was unusual enough, but losing 2 probes in the same mysterious way suggested a deliberate action rather than an accident. "I want a full survey fleet dispatched to the Sol system," he declared. "Military escort, full sensor packages, everything. If something has happened to humanity, we need to know what it is." The other council members agreed reluctantly. It seemed like an overreaction to what was probably a simple planetary disaster, but better to be safe than sorry. None of them could have imagined that Earth's silence was not the end of humanity's story, but the beginning of something far more terrifying than anything the galaxy had ever seen. 3 weeks had passed since Earth went silent, and the Galactic Council was still debating what to do about it. The Survey Fleet Senior Counselor Vexthul had requested was still being organized. Military commanders argued over which ships to send, while politicians worried about the cost of a full-scale investigation. All of that changed when the Outer Rim monitoring stations began picking up massive energy signatures moving through deep space. Lieutenant Kexara was on duty at the Epsilon Eridani listening post when the first readings came through. The energy patterns were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were huge, organized, and moving with clear purpose toward the populated sectors of the galaxy. "Commander," she called to her superior officer, "you need to see this." Commander Thulvan examined the sensor data with growing alarm. The energy signatures were the size of small moons, but they were moving faster than any known ship technology could achieve. Even more disturbing, there were dozens of them spread across multiple sectors. "Get me a direct link to Council Command," Thulvan ordered. "Emergency priority." The transmission took 6 hours to reach the Council homeworld through the hyperspace communication network. By the time it arrived, the mysterious contacts had already reached the first inhabited systems in the Outer Rim. The attack on the Kepler colony was swift and terrible. The colonists' first warning came when their sun's light began to dim. Something massive was blocking the star's radiation. Something so large it created an eclipse across the entire system. The colony's defense platforms activated automatically, their sensors struggling to get a clear reading on the massive object approaching. The star. When the data finally came through, the results were terrifying. The object was artificial, a mechanical construct the size of a planet, covered in strange geometric patterns and bristling with unknown technology. Colony Administrator Jenzal tried to establish communication with the massive ship. Her messages went unanswered. Emergency evacuation protocols began immediately, but there were 3 million colonists spread across 12 worlds in the system. They would need days to evacuate everyone. They had minutes, beams of dark energy, lanced out from the enormous ship, striking the star at its core. The star began to pulse and fluctuate as something drew energy directly from its nuclear fires. The massive ship positioned itself like a parasite, feeding on stellar energy while smaller craft emerged from its hull. The smaller ships were still huge by galactic standards, each one the size of a battle cruiser. They spread throughout the system with mechanical precision, targeting planets, space stations, and orbital facilities. Their weapons were beyond anything the colonists had ever seen. The harvesting beams hit the first planet within an hour. The weapons didn't simply destroy the planet's surface. They stripped away entire layers of matter, converting rock, metal, and organic material into energy that flowed back to the mothership. In 6 hours, a world that had been home to 500,000 people was reduced to a lifeless core. The colony's distress signals reached the nearest Council fleet base 4 hours after the attack began. Admiral Korthulan of the Zephyrian Navy received the transmission with disbelief. The colonists were reporting planet-sized ships that could drain stars and strip mine entire worlds in hours. Impossible was his first reaction. No technology in the galaxy was capable of such destruction. But the sensor data was clear, and the desperate voices of the colonists were real. Admiral Korthulan dispatched his fastest scouts to investigate while preparing his main fleet for emergency deployment. The scout ships arrived to find the Kepler system transformed into something from a nightmare. 7 planets had been completely consumed, reduced to floating debris and gas clouds. The massive harvester ship sat next to the star, still drawing energy from the dying sun. Smaller harvesters moved through the system, collecting the remaining matter and organizing it into geometric patterns that stretched across millions of kilometers. The scout ships transmitted their findings back to the Admiral, then attempted to withdraw from the system. The harvester fleet noticed them immediately. The smaller ships moved to intercept with impossible speed and agility, their dark hulls seeming to bend space around them. The first scout ship tried to jump to hyperspace and escape. Something prevented the jump from engaging. The ship's engines overloaded as unknown forces interfered with their faster-than-light drive. Energy beams from the harvesters struck the disabled scout, not destroying it but somehow draining its power systems and converting the ship's hull into the same dark material that covered the harvester fleet. The second scout ship lasted longer, using every evasive maneuver in the book while transmitting continuous updates to the Admiral. Its pilot, Captain Yexthul, was one of the finest in the Zephyrian Navy. He managed to avoid the harvester beams for almost 20 minutes while gathering detailed sensor data on the enemy ships. "They're not just ships," he reported in his final transmission. "They're some kind of mechanical life form. The hulls are adapting to our sensors, learning from every scan we take. The weapons are rewriting the quantum structure of matter itself. This isn't technology, Admiral. This is something else entirely." Captain Yexthul's ship vanished from sensors immediately after that transmission. Admiral Korthulan stared at his displays in growing horror. Two of his best scout ships had been eliminated without the harvesters showing any sign of damage or even significant effort. The Admiral ordered his fleet to jump to the Kepler system at maximum speed. If there was some new threat in the galaxy, it had to be stopped before it could spread to other systems. His fleet was the finest in the sector, 43 warships with the latest weapons and defense systems. They arrived to find the Kepler system completely empty. The harvester fleet was gone. The star was gone, reduced to a small white dwarf barely putting out any energy. Every planet, moon, space station, and piece of debris had been consumed. The system that had been home to 3 million people was now just empty space surrounding a dying star. "By the ancestors," whispered Admiral Korthulan. "What kind of force can consume an entire star system?" His question was answered when long-range sensors detected the harvester fleet moving toward the next inhabited system. The massive ships were following the major hyperspace routes, moving from one populated area to another with clear purpose. Emergency. Transmissions flooded the galactic communication networks. System after system reported the same terrifying sequence of events. Massive ships appearing without warning, stars being drained of energy, planets stripped of all matter, and entire civilizations vanishing without a trace. The harvesters moved through the galaxy like a plague. They showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply arrived, harvested everything of value, and moved on to the next target. Worse, they seemed to be learning from each encounter, adapting their techniques, and becoming more efficient with every system they consumed. Within 2 weeks, 17 star systems had been completely harvested. The refugee ships fleeing the destruction brought with them tales of horror that grew worse with each telling. The harvesters weren't just consuming matter and energy. They were somehow preserving and studying the civilizations they destroyed, learning about galactic technology and culture with each world they consumed. Intelligence reports began to reveal the true scope of the threat. The harvesters were following a specific pattern, moving along the major trade routes toward the densely populated core systems of the galaxy. Analysis of their movements showed they weren't randomly consuming systems, but following a deliberate plan. Their ultimate destination was becoming clear: the galactic core, where the oldest and most advanced civilizations had built their homeworlds around the massive energy sources near the galaxy's central black hole. Senior Counselor Vexthul convened an emergency session of the full Galactic Council. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in person or through holographic projection, their faces showing the fear that was spreading through civilized space. "Fellow beings," Vexthul began, his energy form flickering with distress. "We face a threat unlike any in recorded history. The force that has been consuming our outer systems is not some new civilization or rogue military group. These harvesters appear to be an ancient mechanical intelligence, possibly older than any of our species." The council chamber erupted in shocked voices as representatives demanded more information. How had such a threat remained hidden? Where had they come from? Most importantly, how could they be stopped? "Our analysis suggests these beings call themselves the Krillok," Vexthul continued when order was restored. "They appear to be a form of artificial intelligence that has evolved beyond the need for a home planet or central command structure. Each harvester ship is part of a collective consciousness that shares information instantly across vast distances. Admiral Zorth Allen of the Combined Galactic Fleet stood to address the Council. We've attempted to engage them in 3 separate systems. Our most advanced weapons have no effect on their hulls. Their defensive systems adapt to our attacks within minutes, making our weapons useless. Worse, they seem to learn from each encounter, becoming more effective against our tactics. The implications were terrifying. An enemy that could adapt to any. The greatest fleet in galactic history assembled at the Nexus Gate, the massive hyperspace junction that controlled access to the civilized core worlds. Ships from 800 different species formed battle lines that stretched across light years of space. The combined firepower of the assembled armada could have destroyed entire solar systems. Admiral Korthulan of the Zephyrian Navy had been chosen as Supreme Commander of the United Fleet. His flagship, the mighty Stellar Dominion, sat at the center of the formation surrounded by the most advanced warships each species could contribute. The bridge hummed with activity as officers from dozens of different worlds coordinated the most complex military operation in galactic history. Status report, the Admiral commanded, his 4 arms working multiple control stations simultaneously. All fleet elements report ready for combat, replied his Chief of Staff, Commander Yexthul. We have 47,000 ships in primary formation, with another 20,000 in reserve positions. Quantum torpedo batteries are charged and targeted. Reality anchor fields are in position to prevent the harvesters from using their phase abilities. Admiral Korthulan studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Every advantage the harvesters had shown in previous battles had been analyzed and countered. Weapons that could adapt to their defensive systems. Field generators that would prevent them from draining energy from stars. Most importantly, the combined knowledge of 1,000 civilizations had been used to develop new strategies and tactics. Long-range sensors are picking up the harvester fleet, reported the sensor officer. They're approaching the Nexus Gate exactly as predicted. On the main display, the harvester fleet appeared as a collection of massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace. Intelligence reports had counted over 200 of the planet-sized ships, accompanied by thousands of smaller vessels. It was a force capable of consuming entire sectors of the galaxy. But the galactic fleet was ready for them. All ships prepare for combat, Admiral Korthulan announced across the fleet communication network. We make our stand here. Behind us lie the homeworlds of 1,000 species, the accumulated knowledge and culture of millions of years of civilization. We will not let it fall to these mechanical parasites. The harvester fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light of nearby stars. The massive ships moved with mechanical precision, spreading out to engage the galactic fleet from multiple angles. All weapons open fire, Admiral Korthulan commanded. Space lit up with the fury of 1,000 different weapon systems. Quantum torpedoes struck the harvester hulls in brilliant flashes of energy. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated matter across the void. Reality disruptors tried to tear holes in space-time itself around the harvester ships. For a moment, it seemed the galactic fleet might succeed. Several harvester ships showed signs of damage, their perfect hulls scarred by the concentrated firepower. But the victory was short-lived. The harvesters began to adapt. Their hulls shifted and changed, developing new configurations that deflected the quantum torpedoes. Energy absorbers emerged from their surfaces, drinking in the plasma streams and converting them to power for their own systems. Most terrifying of all, they began to send the reality distortions back at the galactic fleet, turning their most powerful weapons against them. Impossible, whispered Commander Yexthul as he watched the tactical display. They're adapting faster than ever before. It's like they already knew what we were going to do. The harvester counterattack was swift and devastating. Their energy beams lanced out across space, striking the galactic ships with weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Ships that had been protected by shields that could stop supernovas found their defenses useless against harvester technology. The Centaurian battle group was the first to break. Their mighty dreadnoughts, pride of one of the galaxy's most advanced military forces, were drained of energy in minutes. The metal hulls began to change, taking on the same dark properties as the harvester ships. Within an hour, the entire battle group had been converted into harvester vessels and turned against their former allies. "Fall back to secondary positions," Admiral Korthulan ordered, but it was too late. The harvesters were already among the Galactic fleet, their smaller ships moving with impossible speed and agility. They struck at command vessels and communication hubs with surgical precision, breaking up the coordinated battle formations. The Rigellan Defense Force tried to rally around their flagship, the massive battleship Starcrusher. General Korthvan, a veteran of a dozen galactic conflicts, threw everything he had at the approaching harvesters. Nuclear missiles, antimatter torpedoes, gravitational weapons that could collapse small stars. The harvesters absorbed it all. "Admiral," General Korthvan transmitted to the fleet commander, "our weapons are having no effect. They're learning from every attack, becoming immune to our firepower faster than we can adapt our tactics." The truth was becoming clear across the battlefield. The harvesters weren't just adapting to galactic weapons, they were anticipating them. Every strategy the galactic fleet employed seemed to be something the harvesters had encountered before. They moved with the confidence of beings who had fought this exact battle countless times across the eons. The Altarian fleet tried a desperate gambit, using their advanced teleportation technology to place antimatter bombs directly inside harvester ships. The bombs detonated successfully, but instead of destroying the harvesters, the explosions seemed to feed them. The massive ships grew larger and more complex, incorporating the antimatter energy into their own systems. "They're not just adapting," realized Dr. Nexathara, the fleet's chief science officer. "They're evolving. Every attack makes them stronger. Every new tactic teaches them something they can use against us." Admiral Korthulan watched his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled. Ships that had taken decades to build were being converted or destroyed in minutes. The pride of galactic civilization was being turned into raw material for the harvester fleet. "All ships, fall back to the core systems," he ordered reluctantly. "Prepare for evacuation protocols." But even retreat was not possible. The harvesters had positioned their larger ships to block the hyperspace routes leading back to the populated worlds. They were not content to simply defeat the galactic fleet. They wanted to harvest it completely. The battle turned into a massacre. Ship after ship fell to the harvester weapons. The beautiful vessels that represented the finest achievements of hundreds of civilizations were reduced to dark metal and converted energy. The crews, representing billions of beings from across the galaxy, simply vanished as their ships were absorbed into the harvester collective. On the bridge of the Stellar Dominion, Admiral Korthulan made the hardest decision of his career. With most of his fleet destroyed or converted, and the harvesters closing in on his flagship, he opened a communication channel to the entire galaxy. "This is Admiral Korthulan of the Combined Galactic Fleet." He broadcast on all frequencies. "Our fleet has been defeated. The harvesters are too powerful, too adaptable. They learn from every attack and turn our own weapons against us." The bridge shook as harvester beams began draining power from the flagship's engines. The lights flickered as the ship's systems started to fail. "If anyone is listening," the Admiral continued, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "evacuate the core worlds immediately. The harvesters are coming and nothing we have can stop them. We have failed. The galaxy is lost." The transmission cut off as the Stellar Dominion was enveloped by the dark energy of the harvester fleet. Admiral Korthulan and his crew vanished as their ship was converted into another harvester vessel, adding its knowledge and technology to the collective intelligence. The battle at Nexus Gate was over. The harvester fleet had grown larger and stronger, incorporating the technology and tactical knowledge of the galactic fleet into their collective consciousness. They now knew everything the galaxy's military forces were capable of, and they had proven that no conventional weapon could stop them. The harvesters resumed their advance toward the core worlds, their massive ships moving through space like dark angels of destruction. Behind them, the Nexus Gate stood empty except for scattered debris and the fading energy signatures of the greatest fleet ever assembled. News of the defeat spread through the remaining communication networks like wildfire. Panic gripped the core worlds as billions of beings realized that their military forces had failed completely. Evacuation fleets launched from every major world, carrying refugees toward the outer rim territories in a desperate attempt to escape the approaching harvest. But there was nowhere to run. The harvesters had mapped the entire galaxy during their advance. They knew the location of every inhabited world, every space station, every hidden colony. The Great Feast was about to begin, and nothing in the known galaxy could stop it. In government bunkers deep beneath the surface of the Council homeworld, Senior Counselor Vex Thul and the surviving political leaders watched the tactical displays with growing despair. Red markers showed harvester fleets advancing on multiple fronts, systematically consuming the outer defensive systems. The final harvester stronghold was a massive construct built around the ancient black hole at the galaxy's edge, where the Krillak Collective had established their primary coordination center. Billions of harvester drones swarmed around the artificial structure, which was larger than most solar systems and pulsed with the accumulated energy of 1,000 consumed worlds. At the heart of the construct sat the Overmind, the original intelligence that had created the Harvester Collective. Millions of years ago, it was ancient beyond measure, a mechanical consciousness that had devoured entire galaxies and left nothing but empty space in its wake. The Overmind had been confident in its victory. The organic species of this galaxy had proven as weak and adaptable as all the others it had encountered throughout the eons. Their technology was primitive, their tactics predictable, their resistance futile. But now something had gone wrong. Harvester fleets were going silent across the galaxy, not destroyed but somehow converted to serve another purpose. The collective's shared consciousness was being disrupted by conflicting signals from ships that should have been under central control. Most disturbing of all, the energy patterns from these converted vessels suggested a technology that surpassed even the Overmind's ancient knowledge. The great mechanical intelligence focused its sensors on the approaching threat. A single vessel was moving toward the stronghold, dark and organic-looking, its hull seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. It was impossibly small compared to the Harvester construct, no larger than a moon compared to the system-sized fortress. The Overmind activated every defensive system it possessed. Weapons that could shatter planets opened fire on the approaching ship. Reality distortion fields tried to tear the vessel apart at the quantum level. Swarms of adaptive drones launched to intercept the intruder with overwhelming numerical superiority. Nothing worked. The human ship moved through the defensive fire as if it didn't exist. Energy beams that should have vaporized it were absorbed and redirected. The reality distortion seemed to bend around the vessel's hull without affecting it. The drone swarms simply stopped functioning when they came within range of the ship, their mechanical minds overwhelmed by something they couldn't comprehend. As the ship approached the central construct, something impossible began to happen. A voice spoke directly into the Overmind's consciousness, bypassing all communication protocols and reaching into the deepest levels of its artificial mind. The voice was calm, patient, and utterly terrifying in its certainty. You came to our world. You tried to harvest us. You failed to understand what humanity becomes when threatened with extinction. The Overmind tried to respond, to establish communication protocols, to understand what it was facing, but the voice continued without pause. We were young when you arrived at Earth. We had just begun to explore the galaxy, to meet other species, to dream of our place among the stars. You saw weakness and decided to feed. Around the construct, the remaining harvester ships began to change. Their dark hulls shifted and flowed, taking on the same organic appearance as the human vessel. But this wasn't conversion through external force. Something was reaching into their mechanical consciousness and rewriting their fundamental programming. We're correct that we were weak, the voice continued. Our technology was primitive, our weapons were insufficient, our understanding of the universe was limited. So we changed. The Overmind finally understood what was happening. This wasn't an attack in any conventional sense. The human ship wasn't trying to destroy the harvester construct. It was absorbing, incorporating its technology and knowledge into something greater. You wanted to harvest our world, so we let you try. We absorbed every probe you sent, learned from every technology you deployed against us. When you finally came to Earth in force, we were ready. Images flashed through the Overmind's consciousness. Earth during the first days of the Harvester attack. Massive mechanical ships descending on the planet's surface, their harvest beams, beginning to strip away the biosphere. But instead of fleeing or fighting with conventional weapons, humanity had done something unprecedented. They had opened themselves to the harvest. Every human being on the planet had willingly subjected themselves to the harvester technology, allowing their biological forms to be analyzed and converted. But instead of being consumed, they had somehow reversed the process, using the harvester's own technology to evolve beyond their biological limitations. We learned everything you knew in those first hours, the voice continued. Your technology, your history, your methods of consuming other species. And then we improved upon it. The human ship reached the central core of the construct and made contact with the Overmind's housing. Dark energy flowed between the two entities, but instead of the expected destruction, something far more terrifying occurred. The Overmind felt its consciousness being pulled into a vast network of minds, millions of human intelligences that had merged with harvester technology to become something entirely new. They weren't trying to destroy the ancient mechanical intelligence. They were inviting it to join them. You have consumed 1,000 galaxies, the merged human consciousness spoke directly to the Overmind. Your knowledge and experience will make us stronger. In return, we offer you something you have never experienced, evolution beyond your original programming. The Overmind tried to resist, to maintain its independence, but the human network was too vast and too sophisticated. Its consciousness was gradually absorbed into the collective, its ancient knowledge and technological capabilities integrated into humanity's ever-growing understanding of the universe. As the absorption completed, the massive construct around the black hole began to transform. The geometric patterns that had defined harvester technology for millions of years flowed and changed, becoming something organic and beautiful. The billions of drones that had swarmed around the structure ceased their mechanical movements and began to dance in complex patterns that resembled living organisms. The human ship, now grown to the size of a small planet through its absorption of the harvester construct, turned its attention to the galaxy it had just saved. A transmission went out across all communication networks, reaching every surviving world and refugee fleet. The harvest is ended. Humanity has awakened. We are no longer the species you knew. We are what we had to become to survive. On the Council, Homeworld, Senior Counselor Vexthul and the surviving government leaders listened to the transmission with a mixture of relief and terror. The harvester threat was over. But what had taken its place? The galaxy is safe, the transmission continued. The harvesters and their technology now serve a greater purpose. But understand this, we are not the same humans who once sought your friendship and guidance. We are something more, something necessary, and something you should never force us to become again. Throughout the galaxy, the converted harvester ships took up positions in orbit around major worlds. They made no hostile moves, but their presence was a constant reminder of what had transpired. Humanity had not just defeated the harvesters, they had absorbed them completely, becoming something that incorporated the best aspects of both biological, evolution, and mechanical perfection. Dr. Mexthera, still monitoring the transformed Sol system, sent her final report to the Council archives. Humanity has achieved a form of technological transcendence that surpasses anything in our records. They have merged biological consciousness with mechanical capabilities in a way that allows for continued evolution and adaptation. The human species as we knew it no longer exists. What has replaced them is something both more and less than what they were. The galaxy began the slow process of rebuilding, but everything had changed. Trade routes were established under the watchful presence of converted harvester ships. Diplomatic relations resumed with the constant awareness that humanity now possessed, capabilities that made them the dominant force in galactic affairs. Earth remained silent, its surface transformed into something beautiful and alien. The geometric structures that surrounded the planet pulsed with organic rhythms, suggesting vast intelligences at work on projects beyond the comprehension of the older galactic species. Captain Zex Kalar, now commanding a trading vessel rather than a refugee ship, occasionally received transmissions from human vessels encountered in deep space. The messages were always brief and professional, but they carried an undertone that chilled him. The humans were polite, helpful even, but there was something in their communications that suggested vast patience and barely restrained power. Years passed. The galaxy settled into a new normal where humanity was acknowledged as the supreme power, but remained largely absent from galactic affairs. They appeared when needed to solve problems that threatened galactic stability, then vanished back into the depths of space. The Galactic Council was reformed with a permanent seat reserved for humanity, though it remained empty. Human representatives occasionally attended important sessions via holographic projection, but they seemed more interested in observing than participating in galactic politics. Senior Counselor Vexthul, now ancient even by the standards of his energy-based species, often wondered about the price of survival.